Welcome to the English Matura with JB podcast. Today we're diving into the fascinating world of travel and tourism. Joining us in the studio are two experts who will be leading today's discussion. I'll now hand it over to our hosts, Iris and Miles.
Hey there. I was just thinking about that feeling you get when you're standing in the middle of a busy airport, looking up at the flight status board, and suddenly you realize you're not just moving between cities, you're moving between worlds. For a high school student learning English, that first big trip isn't just a holiday, it's the ultimate final exam, right? But it's the kind of exam where the questions are about finding a hidden food market or figuring out why everyone in London is saying sorry when you're the one who bumped into them.
It really is the ultimate test of functional English. You can study grammar books for years, but nothing prepares you for the moment a flight to Athens gets canceled and you have to negotiate a solution at a crowded check-in desk. What we're looking at today is how to move past the textbook version of travel and start navigating the real world with confidence. It's about more than just knowing the word for suitcase. It's about understanding the directness dilemma in the US, or why the British use self-deprecating humor as a polite buffer in conversation.
I love that term, directness dilemma. It sounds like a spy novel, but it's actually just the reality of trying to get a coffee without sounding rude. I've definitely been that person who thinks they're being polite by being vague, only to realize the other person has no idea what I actually want.
Exactly. And that's why we're going to break this down into a real playbook for you. We're going to dive into the essential vocabulary that helps you describe a place, moving from touristy spots to those unspoilt nature reserves. Then we'll tackle the high-stakes world of airport fiascos and, maybe most importantly, the politeness rules that vary so much between places like New York, London, and Sydney.
It's basically a survival guide for your social life abroad. We're moving from the what of travel, the bags and the tickets, to the how, the communication and the culture. So if you've ever worried about accidentally offending someone or just getting lost in a maze of backstreets, stay with us.
Because the goal isn't just to arrive at your destination, it's to actually belong there while you're visiting. Let's start by looking at how we actually describe the world we're exploring, because the words you choose change the kind of trip you have.
Iris, when most people talk about their trips, they use the same three words: nice, good, or busy. But if you're wandering through a medieval city or standing on a cliffside, those words feel a bit thin, don't they? I was looking at some B2 level vocabulary, and there are some much better ways to paint a picture of where you are, like the word picturesque. It's such a classic, but it literally means something looks like a picture or a postcard.
It's a great word because it conveys a specific kind of beauty, charming, traditional, and visually perfect. But then you have breathtaking, which is a level up. That's for the views that actually make you stop and gasp, like looking out over a valley from a high mountain trail. For a student, using these adjectives correctly is like moving from black and white to color in your descriptions.
I also noticed a distinction between touristy and vibrant. To me, touristy has a bit of a negative vibe, right? It suggests a place is crowded with people and full of cheap souvenirs. But vibrant or lively is a compliment. It means the area is full of life, energy, and things to do.
That's a really important distinction. You might avoid a touristy area if you're looking for something authentic, but you'd actively seek out a vibrant neighborhood to experience the local culture. And if you really want to get away from the crowds, you go off the beaten track. That's one of those idioms that travelers love. It means you're heading to places that aren't the standard tourist stops. You might find yourself in the back streets, those narrower, quieter streets behind the main shopping areas.
I've always found that the best food is in the back streets. You find those little food markets where people are actually living their lives, not just performing for tourists. It's where you get to sample the local cuisine, which is a much more elegant way of saying eat the local food.
It is. And when you're out there, you might encounter ruins, the remains of old buildings or castles, or find yourself on a hiking trail that stretches for kilometers through a nature reserve. These places are often unspoilt, meaning humans haven't changed or ruined them yet. They remain in their natural state.
Unspoilt is a beautiful word. It feels very peaceful. But there's a flip side, right? Sometimes a place is remote, which sounds romantic until you realize there are few amenities nearby, like no shops or easy transport. You have to be prepared for that.
You do. And preparing often starts with the verbs we use before we even leave. You pack your bags, but more importantly, you make a reservation. Whether it's for a hotel or a table at a popular restaurant, booking ahead is the key to a smooth trip. And once you're there, the goal is to chill out or unwind, to finally let go of the stress of school or work.
I'm a big fan of the stroll, just walking at a leisurely pace with no particular aim. It's the opposite of hitting the shops, which is when you go on a mission to buy souvenirs or clothes. But even with the best plans, things go wrong. You might have to take a detour because of road work, or your flight might get delayed. That's where the real communication challenges begin.
And that's exactly what we need to look at next, because knowing the words for the scenery is one thing, but knowing how to handle a flight fiasco when you're tired and frustrated at the airport, that's a different skill set entirely.
Okay, so picture this. You're at the airport, you're heading to Beijing for a wedding, you've got a heavy bag, a laptop, and you're ready to go. Then you look at the board. Flight 86A? Delayed. 4 hours. Suddenly, your stroll through the terminal turns into a stress test. This is what teachers call a task-based scenario, and it's where your English has to become very practical, very fast.
It's a classic flight fiasco. When this happens, your first instinct might be to feel frustrated, but the key is how you interact with the airport staff. You need to ask for information clearly. Instead of just saying, "Why delay?" you'd ask, "Is the flight on time?" Or, "Which gate is it for the Beijing flight?"
And if you're stuck there for 4 hours, you might want to negotiate. Maybe you want an upgrade to business class because of the wait, or at least a meal voucher. But here's the catch. The source material notes that airport staff are often instructed to be polite but firm. They might only offer upgrades to very polite passengers.
That's such a great real-world lesson. Your tone of voice and the way you phrase your request can literally change your travel experience. If you're demanding, you get nothing. If you're polite, you might get that voucher. And then there's the security line. That's another high-stress zone where you have to follow imperatives, direct instructions like place your bag in the tray or come through the scanner.
Chilled, laid back, and mellow. I always get nervous at security, even when I've done nothing wrong. It's the tray tables should be securely fastened energy, but for your whole life. You're hearing phrases like overhead locker, baggage reclaim, and customs. If you don't know those terms, the whole process feels twice as long.
It really does. And if your flight is actually canceled, like the flight to Athens in our scenario, you have to head to the check-in desk to resolve the issue. This is where modals for requests come in handy. Can I see your boarding pass? Can I change to a window seat? These aren't just grammar points. They are the tools you use to get where you're going.
It's interesting how the staff role in these practice scenarios is often encouraged to be strict. It forces the passenger to use more descriptive language. If you can't see your suitcases anywhere, you can't just point and grunt. You have to say, "I can't see our suitcases at the baggage reclaim."
And that brings up a really interesting point about cultural norms. The way you express a problem, like a missing bag or a delay, changes depending on where you are. In some cultures, being very direct about a problem is expected. In others, it's seen as a faux pas, a false step in social etiquette.
Chilled, laid back, and mellow. A faux pas. I love that phrase. It's like accidentally stepping on someone's toes, but with your words. And apparently 65% of international students experience culture shock in their first few months abroad because of these little missteps.
It's a huge number, and it often stems from things we don't even think about, like how much eye contact we make or how a firm handshake signifies confidence in the US. So as we move from the airport into the actual country, we have to start looking at these invisible rules. Because once you leave the terminal, the real directness dilemma begins.
So we've made it out of the airport, past customs, and we're finally in the city. But now we hit a new wall, the way people actually talk to each other. I was reading about how in the United States, people really value individualism and forthrightness. Basically, Americans like to get straight to the point. Yes means yes, and no means no.
Right, and that can be a shock if you're from a culture where maybe is a polite way to say no. In the US, if you say maybe, people might think you're actually considering it. This directness is often seen as a sign of honesty and authenticity there. But then you hop across the ocean to the UK, and it's a completely different story.
Ah, the British. They're the masters of subtlety, aren't they? The source material says they're keen on maintaining harmony and use idiomatic expressions as polite buffers. Being too direct in London might actually be perceived as rude.
It's a delicate balance. The British use humor, especially self-deprecation and irony, to navigate social situations. It's a way of not taking yourself too seriously. And then you have Canada, where apologizing is almost a national sport. Even if it's not your fault, saying sorry is seen as a gesture of politeness and consideration.
I've definitely heard that about Canadians. It's like they use sorry the way we use or But let's talk about the I want mistake. This is a big one for students. When you're learning a language, your brain often translates literally from your native tongue. So if you want a coffee, you might say, I want a coffee, or give me a coffee.
And in English, that sounds incredibly abrupt, almost like a command. Even I'd like a coffee can sometimes sound a bit demanding if it's not in the right context, like when a person hasn't offered to serve you yet. The golden rule for being polite in these situations is actually pretty simple. Can I have, please?
Can I have a coffee, please? It's such a small change, but it makes a huge difference in how you're perceived. And the please part is non-negotiable. Apparently, in some cultures, like Brazil, people might only say please once in a whole conversation. But in English-speaking countries, every new request needs a new please. It's a basic cultural rule.
It really is, and it's not just about the words, it's about the intonation. Some people use an imperative sentence, a command, but try to make it a question by raising their voice at the end, like saying, give me a coffee, with a smile. To a native speaker that still feels like a singing imperative, it's still a bit rude.
So the fix is always to add can I or can you before the action. Can you send me an email instead of send me an email? It's about building those polite buffers. And that leads us to a whole set of chunks or phrases that can make requests feel much softer.
Exactly. Phrases like, would you mind, followed by an ein-end verb, or is there any chance you could? These are the tools that help you avoid those awkward faux pas and actually connect with people. But speaking of connecting with people, there's one more huge cultural area we haven't touched on yet, the dinner table. Because dining etiquette is where the rules get really specific.
Okay, let's talk food. We already mentioned sampling the local cuisine, but once you're actually sitting down in a restaurant, the invisible rules start flying at you. For example, did you know that in the US and Canada, tipping is customary and expected? You're expected to leave 15 to 20% of the total bill because it's a significant part of the server's income.
It's a huge cultural shift if you're coming from Australia or New Zealand, where tipping is not obligatory at all. In those countries, you might leave a small tip for exceptional service, but it's not the standard expectation. If you don't tip in New York, it's not just a faux pas. It's seen as quite a serious lack of respect for the worker.
And then's the to-go box. In the US, it's totally normal to ask for one if you have leftovers. It signals that you don't like waste. But in some other cultures, that might be seen as a bit low class or strange. It's all about the overarching ethos of the country. In the US, it's about individualism and efficiency.
Whereas in the UK, dining is more about decorum and history. You have to use your utensils correctly, keep your elbows off the table, and when you're finished, you place your fork and knife parallel on the plate with the handles facing to the right. It's very specific.
Chilled, laid back, and mellow. I would definitely fail that test. I'm an elbows on the table kind of guy. But what about the casualness of Australia? They seem much more laid back.
They are. Australians value egalitarianism, the idea that everyone is equal. That's why it's common to address people by their first names right away, even in professional settings. New Zealand is similar. They call themselves Kiwis and have a very down-to-earth nature. But even there, punctuality is still valued, especially in business.
Punctuality is such a big one. I read that in the US, being on time actually means arriving a few minutes early. If you're 10 or 15 minutes late, you might miss important decisions, and it's seen as disrespectful to other people's time.
It's a sign of respect across almost all English-speaking countries, although Australians might be slightly more flexible in social situations. But when you're a student, especially in a classroom, being on time is non-negotiable. And that brings us to another classroom shock: participation.
Oh, right. In some countries, asking a professor a question is like challenging their authority. But in the US, if you don't speak up, the teacher thinks you're disengaged. They actually value critical thinking and active participation.
It's a complete reversal of expectations, and it can be exhausting to adapt to all these rules at once. That's why the sources suggest that cultural faux pas aren't failures. They're just shared experiences that you can laugh about later. The key is to have a positive attitude and be willing to grow from the mistakes.
Chilled, laid back, and mellow. I love that. Laughing at yourself for getting ice water when you wanted just plain water, or for using the wrong fork. It builds resilience. But how do you actually practice this? How do you move from knowing the rules to actually living them? I think we need a real-world playbook for the listener.
So, if you're listening to this and you're planning your first big trip, or maybe you're already studying abroad, let's get practical. How do you actually avoid the shock and start finding those unspoiled experiences?
Step 1 is all about your mindset. Instead of judging a difference, approach it with curiosity. One great tip from the sources is to keep a journal of small cultural wins, like the first time you successfully made a polite request using "would you mind," or the first time you successfully negotiated at an airport.
That's a great idea. It turns the struggle into a game. Step 2 is immersion. If you're a student, join 2 or 3 student clubs that match your interests. It gives you a natural space to practice your communication and learn social norms without the pressure of a classroom.
And don't just stick to clubs for people from your own country. Mix it up. Another tip is to choose shared student accommodation. Living with people from different backgrounds gives you daily exposure to how they decorate, what they eat, and how they handle conflict. It's like a 24/7 cultural education.
Chilled, laid back, and mellow. What about exploring the city? I liked the suggestion to walk or use public transportation instead of just taking ride shares. It forces you to navigate like a local and see the real culture beyond the tourist attractions.
Exactly. Try a new coffee shop or restaurant weekly and watch how people interact. Use that time to practice your eye contact. It's expected in American professional settings and shows confidence and honesty.
Chilled, laid back, and mellow. And don't forget the language chunks. We should probably do a quick drill on those polite requests, because they're your social armor when things go wrong. Let's role play a bit. If I'm a grumpy airport staff member, and you want an upgrade because your flight is delayed, how do you handle it?
Okay, I'd start with something like, "Excuse me, I see my flight to Beijing is delayed by 4 hours. Is there any chance I could get an upgrade to business class while I wait?"
Oh, that's good. You used "is there any chance?" and you were very direct but polite. I might say, "I'm sorry we can't do upgrades today, but here is a meal voucher."
And then I'd say, "I'd really appreciate that, thank you. Would you mind telling me where the nearest food market or cafe is?" See, I'm using the vocabulary we learned, food market, and another polite chunk. Would you mind?
You're a pro. You've got the please in there, the can I, and the specific vocabulary. It makes you sound like a global citizen rather than just a tourist. And that's the real goal, isn't it?
It is. It's about building cultural intelligence, the ability to understand and adapt to these different norms. It's not about abandoning your own identity. It's about adding new layers to it so you can forge meaningful connections wherever you go.
And honestly, the more you understand the why behind the rules, like why Americans value directness or why the British love irony, the more imperturbable you become. You don't get shaken by the chaos because you understand the mechanism of the culture.
Imperturbable. That's a great word to end on. It means having an unshakable inner calm, and that calm comes from preparation. So let's wrap this up with some final reflections on how to take these lessons into the real world.
You know, Iris, looking at all this, it's clear that travel English isn't just a list of words. It's a bridge. It's the difference between being a spectator who just watches a country and being a participant who actually experiences it. We've covered everything from the breathtaking views of an unspoiled nature reserve to the stressful reality of baggage reclaim.
And we've seen that the most important tool in your bag isn't your passport, it's your politeness. Whether you're using "can I have please" to order a coffee, or "is there any chance you could" to resolve a flight fiasco, these small shifts in language change how the world responds to you.
It's about respecting those social norms, the shared expectations that guide how we interact. Whether it's the egalitarian spirit of Australia or the individualism of the US, every culture has its own mosaic. And as a traveler, your job is to find where you fit into that mosaic.
I love that image. And remember, culture shock is normal. 65% of students feel it. If you feel overwhelmed, it just means you're actually engaging with the world. The goal isn't to be perfect, it's to be adaptable.
So, the next time you pack your bags, don't just think about the clothes you'll need. Think about the directness you might need in New York, or the subtlety you'll need in London. Think about the strolls you'll take through back streets and the local cuisine you'll sample.
And most importantly, remember that every faux pas is a learning opportunity. If you laugh at your mistakes and stay curious, you'll find that English-speaking countries aren't just places on a map, they're communities where you can belong.
Well, I'm feeling ready to hit the shops, or at least hit the airport. It's been a blast breaking this down with you, Iris.
It really has. For anyone listening, I hope you take one of these polite chunks or one of these cultural insights and try it out, even if it's just practicing your "can I have please" at a local cafe before you leave.
Exactly. It's the small steps that lead to the big adventures. Thanks for hanging out with us today and diving into the art of being a truly authentic traveler.
Yes, thank you for your time and your curiosity. Safe travels, wherever your hiking trail leads you next.
Chilled, laid back, and mellow. And remember, stay picturesque, stay vibrant, and most of all, stay curious. Bye for now.